Awesome. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another awesome Hack the Box AMA. And first and foremost, no matter where you're at, happy Friday. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Today, we have a really cool AMA. This is kind of something different to try out, where we have a number of members from industry, a number of red teamers from industry that have agreed to be here on a panel and talk about the awesome work that they've done and how you might become a red teamer. That being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll go ahead and bring on our panel and introduce everybody. Here, let me go ahead. Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Awesome. Let's go ahead and we'll start going around and do introductions. First and foremost, thank you all for being here. Just a heads up for everyone that is on the panel, I'll have our side chat that I will put any cues or anything as far as the direction of the AMA and the panel itself, just for anyone that might have hopped in and missed those. So we are rocking and rolling. Awesome. Let's go ahead and go to Michael. Michael Best, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, yeah. I'm Michael Best Kunzel. I've been a red teamer for about 5 months now, been in the industry for 10 plus years, and excited to be here.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Andrew, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew. Hi, everyone. I have been in offensive security since 2007, so a while now. And I've mainly focused on my career on the offensive side, so I'm really happy to be here and happy to share my experience.
Heck yeah. No, thank you so much for being here as well. And then last, but certainly not least, Gordon, could you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name is Gordon. I work as a red teamer at Zoom right now, and I've been doing offensive stuff pretty much my whole career, which really got kicked off in like 2016. And I've been a red teamer specifically of that time for like 6 years, I want to say. It's also been a minute.
Just a little bit of time. No, that's awesome. Thank you as well for being here. Thank you, everyone, for volunteering your time, especially on a Friday. I know that this time is a hot commodity, and you've chosen to spend your time with Dark. That goes for everyone in chat as well, and I hope you feel that your investment pays dividends. Yeah, let's go with that. Awesome. First and foremost, hi to everyone in chat. It looks like we have a very active chat. If you guys have any questions for our wonderful panel, feel free to put them out there. For this panel, we have a wonderful group of folks from industry with questions. We will not be going into things that are specific to individual businesses. We will be talking more of TTP level or how to become a red teamer. So any questions like that, those are perfect. And I'm already seeing an awesome one in there from Oliver. Let's go ahead and actually jump to that. So we'll go to our first question. Oliver Nichols asks, how much of a time commitment is it to stay an avid red teamer? Let's see. Andrew, you look like you're ready for that. Did you want to jump in on it?
Yes, I'll say that because you put avid there, it's going to be a significant time commitment, mainly because as a red teamer, you kind of have to be reasonably diverse in the technologies and the areas that you have to pay attention to, and they all move quickly. So you have to really be keeping up pretty consistently across multiple different fields.
Absolutely. And I mean, you talk about the breadth there and kind of the wide skill set that's necessary for red teaming. Let's see. Michael, did you want to jump in on that one as well? Kind of expand upon that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit of a lifestyle more than just, a career. You do have to be in it. You don't have to be active all the time, learning and researching, but you have to be in the news and you have to be reading and you have to be educated at least.
Absolutely. Now, Gordon, looks like you're itching. You want to go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, it's funny because it's like, I was thinking about this question and it doesn't always feel like it's a massive time commitment because a lot of stuff is fun. But I realize like even in my own free time, like I actually own like a side business and stuff as well, where I'm working more on the defensive side, but even doing that is actually informing back on the offensive side. And so like, especially if you're doing, because red team is kind of, it's a niche term, but even what you're doing inside a red team can vary a lot. Like, are you just doing operations? Are you doing offensive tool development and stuff? Because depending on what you're doing there will also inform how like up to date you need to be. If you're also responsible for building custom in-house tools, you really need to know a lot of the more modern techniques, and that's going to vary depending on the operating systems and stuff you're going up against, what kind of fences you're dealing with. I personally like to specialize with EDR evasion, so that requires a lot of continuous research and testing. But like, I also know there are some folks that they just like to do operations. They don't like to do tool development. So maybe less demand there. Even then, you still want to keep up to speed with latest like TTPs and how you're going to be going about doing things. But a lot of this stuff, it can sound intimidating if someone is like, you need to be living your life. You need to be 24/7. You need to be sleeping and thinking about red teaming. But like, don't be that intimidated, because a lot of stuff is actually just really cool. So I find it fun if I'm like coding, etc. You'll come across an article. It's not like it's a chore to open it up. It's like, oh, this is cool. What did someone try and do this time? So it is a lot of time, but hopefully, if you're interested, it's not going to necessarily feel like it's all the time. It's just going to be something that's like, oh yeah, this cool Twitter article talking about a different way to bypass some kernel-based protections. That'll be interesting. Maybe I can incorporate some of that stuff. It's not quite as intimidating as it sounds. I'll put it that way. But it is a lot of time, admittedly.
What do you mean? We're so scary. Everyone in red team, this is what we eat. I have red team branded waffles I eat in the morning. I have Wheaties that are written.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're not doing that, then you won't make it in this game. Yeah.
Definitely not eating unless you have the red team Wheaties.
This is actually a true fact. You have to hunt for them too. They're not easy to find. Walmart doesn't have them. Well, we started talking about this. There's an awesome follow-up question. By the way, chat, y'all are killing it with the questions. There's a lot of wonderful questions in chat. One thing that I see asked a lot, let's see if I can find it. This one comes from Burrows. What's the difference between pen testing and red teaming? Yeah, I see you guys shaking your heads. This is the question that we have to explain all the time. Anyone want to jump in and take this one?
I'm happy to.
So I'll jump in.
Either one. Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, this is a question that ironically red teamers get. I guess pen testers also get this, but red teamers get this a lot from executives, because they're trying to set up their red team and don't know that what they're trying to do is set up a pen test team. So what's direct to the question, what's the difference between pen testing and red teaming? Red team is taking more of an adversarial emulation mindset. So you're more worried about getting caught. You're more worried about the logs you're leaving. You're more worried about how blue is perceiving, or how the defenders, the detections are perceiving you. Whereas, and you're goal-based. So you're trying to achieve a particular thing. Whereas with pen testing, it's sort of goal-based in that your goal is to like get in and find holes. But with pen testing, you generally have a much shorter time scale. You generally have, you're not worried about who's catching you. So you're very loud. You're just throwing everything against the environment. And your goal is to actually find as many low-hanging findings as possible to try and provide as much value for the one pen test that you're doing. So you're looking for a number of vulnerabilities and severity of vulnerabilities. Whereas with red teaming, you're looking for the right vulnerabilities for you to exploit to not get caught and to achieve your goal. So it's they're doing the same thing. You're hacking the system in both cases, but with very different perspectives. That's a high level.
Wait, you're saying you guys care about being caught? None of that nonsense. Michael, Gordon, did you guys want to jump in on that at all? Andrew, you did a great job. That's a question that we get a lot, and you did a really good job of summing that up. Gordon, Michael, did you guys want to add anything on?
Yeah, I can jump in. I will warn you, as you go into this industry, when you talk to people and ask this question, if you talk to 50 different people, you might get 50 different answers. But to be honest, yeah, I pretty much almost entirely agree with what was just said. I tend to think of pen testing as much more narrow in scope. So think of it more like, usually you'll have an application or something you're trying to test. The key there is that word testing, where you're trying to find everything wrong with this thing, whereas red teaming is much more objective-based and emulation-based. ideally of like, we want to get to this thing. You know, if getting to, let's say it's like financial information or something, if you could do that just by talking to people and having them log in for you and give you the info, that works. You don't need to find any technical vulnerability to get to your objective. But with pen testing, if you did that, they'd be a little bit like, wait, like you talked to who? Your whole point was like to test the application. You're like, technically I did. They would be probably not that happy with you. So yeah, I tend to view it as more narrow in scope. Like I said, or like was said before, stealth is much more important for red teaming. But both sides I tend to find can involve some collaboration with blue depending on the level here. I also think, at least for us as a red team, we do different levels of like operations. So the maximum level is those like stealth ops where you really don't want to get caught. They might run for a much longer period of time, etc. But it can vary a little bit, and that's why I think a lot of people get confused. I think there is at times some room for blending, especially once you start talking about purple teaming and stuff. Like a lot of terms get thrown in and blended up a little bit, but I think what was said before is the biggest difference of the two, and emphasize that word testing in your mind is probably a good way to kind of differentiate it a little bit.
Absolutely. You've both hit on really key points. Pardon me, I was reading a question that we had in chat. We're getting a lot of awesome questions. Before I go on to the next question, Michael, did you want to jump in on that? Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think they covered it pretty well.
Heck yeah. That just means I'm going to start with you with the next question. So this one, we're going to change gears a little bit. This is just a fun question from Ion Rover 2. Would you burn a 0 day for an operation? Michael, do you want to get us started with that one?
Luckily for me, this is a hypothetical. I don't know that I've ever had. I think that would depend on what threat actor we're emulating. If that TTP is within the scope of what we're looking to show in that engagement, there's ways to potentially, simulate that without actually doing it. That could be an option. But I think it really depends on the sophistication of the threat actor that we're looking to emulate and whether or not that would be a reality.
I can jump in next.
Yeah.
Go reverse order if we want. Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it. Whoever wants it.
Yeah, hell no. Sell that thing. Get the money. No, I'm just kidding.
No, continue on that train of thought.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be honest, again, it depends on who you're emulating and such. And if you have a lot of those in the bag, maybe. But honestly, most of the time, you will not need a 0 day to achieve whatever objective you need. And I will tell you, most of the time, the threat actors are not going to be burning 0 days on operations because they won't need to use them. And it's a pretty expensive thing to use depending on the objective. Maybe if you're going up against a really, really important or valuable target and you have no other way in, but most of the time they're not going to be needed. And so we've never needed to burn one on one of the operations I've been on. We have potentially thought about using them more for like the lulls, but not. We don't tend to burn 0 days. You almost never need them to actually complete your objectives. Sadly to say, this is not the movies. You don't usually need to like Tom Cruise in from the ceiling.
Unfortunately, that's so true.
Andrew, do you want to jump in on that one? I guess there's one point there I really want to dive into a little bit further. We've mentioned if it would be necessary or not for emulating the threat actor. Andrew, would you be able to speak to that? Why we would want to burn a 0 day versus why we wouldn't when it comes to emulation?
Yeah. So kind of like was mentioned earlier in regards to the threat actors is some threat actors don't necessarily have the resources to use 0 days and to consequently burn them. So it does depend very much on the threat actor that you're trying to emulate, what their TTPs are, what sort of things that they tend to do. But then also there's the sort of focus of the threat actor. So if your 0 day is in you know, an Office product, and the particular threat actor doesn't tend to go after Office products, then your 0 days kind of out of scope, if you will, to a degree. So there's a really intrinsic tie to the actor that you're emulating and the tool set that you use. But there is also, as was also mentioned earlier, there's different sort of types of scopes of red teams. So not all red teams are adversarial emulation. Some red teams are, say, make up your own adversary and attempt the thing that you can find, regardless of emulating a particular adversary. And when you go from that perspective, then it's feasible to burn a 0 day, but it also depends on who the 0 day belongs to, right? So like if you found the 0 day as the individual contributor and it's yours, then burning it for a client or your employer may not be something you want to do. But if you found that 0 day on work hours, if you will, and it belongs to your employer, then they may actually want you to burn it to make sure that their blue side can detect it, even though it's not a published vulnerability. So, but you might want to keep that under wraps because it's still a IP sort of a scenario. So there's lots of different perspectives on that, but mainly adversarial emulation. You're going to want to follow what the adversary would do.
No, thank you for walking through that. It looks like we had a little bit of issues with a couple of our panel guests. Toby had to drop off just due to illness, and Michael had to drop off due to just family issues. So we're down to the 3. That's okay, though, because you know what? That's all we need. Thank you so much for diving through that. I sincerely appreciate the breakdown of why we would have situations that we want to burn a 0 day, especially because as you mentioned, there's a lot of complexity when it comes to who owns it. Let me go ahead. We had a follow-up question. This is a follow-up question for you, Gordon, that I wanted to pull up. This one comes from Oliver Nichols again. Does that mean you always succeed in your red team goals? And Andrew, feel free to jump on this one too. This is a fun one, talking about operational planning.
So no, you don't always succeed in your red team goals, and hopefully you don't, because if you do, it's good for your team and sad for everyone else. But I will say I've never been part of an operation where we haven't succeeded in at least one of our objectives, but usually there's multiple, like different stages of objectives. So always hit at least one, but there have been a couple times where, because sometimes it really depends on if you're trying to emulate, if you're trying to, like, I work on an internal red team, so we have a little bit more visibility into how the organization works, so we can have a little bit loftier goals, so to speak. So we might be going after something that we're not even sure if it's technically feasible or how it would be done, but we're going to try and do this to see what will happen, kind of thing. Sometimes you get caught. Sometimes it's just you don't have enough time. So it really varies in why you might not succeed. But I would say, there is too much. I still see it often in the industry. There's too much emphasis on, like, we need to pwn and then we win, as opposed to we are trying to help out the organization. That is actually why we're doing this job. So if you get caught, for example, by a technical control, and it's not just that, I mean, this always happens too, right? Especially if you got more junior operators, somebody makes a mistake on keyboard and that you burn, that's one thing. But if you get caught because of a technical control that you didn't know was in place, like a deception related technology, something like that, that's awesome to see, actually. That's great, because that means things are getting harder for you, and that's what you want. You want the environment to continuously get harder and harder for you to go after. So to answer your question, no, have not always succeeded in red team goals, but that is not necessarily a bad thing.
Absolutely. Andrew, did you want to jump in on the succeeding in goals? I'm trying to think of there was a note that I wanted to touch on there, but was there anything that you wanted to jump in on there?
Yeah. So actually, I think that it was mentioned a little bit, but there's different perspectives of goals. So like there's the goal of the red teamer, and then even within that, there's specific goals. Like so you look at security like an onion, the defense in depth sort of mindset. And so like your first goal may just be initial access. Well, your final goal may be own the domain, DA, or financial data, or whatever it is. But there's multiple stepwise goals all the way to the point. So you're going to succeed in some of those. You're going to fail in some of those. There's also within the red teaming community what's known as white carding. So especially on an internal assessment, if the goal of the business for this particular operation is for you to achieve, to identify a path to the finance data, say, then there may be multiple paths that you take and you actually can't pass a particular rung of that onion. You'll white card over that rung and then you'll keep achieving goals behind that. And so it's not so much like a, hey, you guys suck, you couldn't get all the way in. It's more of like a, hey, blue side, you're doing great in this particular spot. We couldn't even pass this spot. So let us get on the other side and let's keep, making the interior of the onion a little bit better. But then, so that's more operationally speaking goals. But then speaking from the business, the goal of a red team is pretty obvious, is just to secure the business. And so every single time you make your business, whether that's your manager, your senior manager, your executives, directors, whatever, whenever you make them more aware of their environment and thus consequently securing the environment better, you've achieved your goal. And so that sort of mindset is what I mean when I tell people that the best way to start a red team in a business is to start a purple team, because the entire goal of the red team is to train blue to catch the bad guys. And so a purple team is exactly doing that. And so I think that as long as you are learning, as long as your business is getting more secure through each event in the operation and through each operation, then your goals are being met.
You started touching on this, talking about where there are tough points in the operation. That's something I really wanted to hit on for the sake of reporting. And Andrew or Gordon, feel free to both jump in on this. Let me go ahead. I'll take down that first question there. When it comes to reporting, what are you focusing on? What is, and I guess on that note, what would you find is the difference between a red report and a pen report? Feel free to address parts of the question you want. I realize it's kind of a complex question, so feel free to pick and choose.
I'll hit that straight on with the reporting. I'm actually a little bit of a fan of reporting, a bit of a grammar Nazi, if you will. The pen reporting versus red reporting is really interesting, because pen reports, you kind of, especially from an external consulting pen testing perspective, you almost always see them very finding heavy. There's lots of findings, and the findings provide enough information to be able to identify what the issue is and remediate it. But usually there's not a lot of what you might call like an exploit scenario behind the finding. Here's the finding, here's the information, go secure your ship. Whereas with the red team report, it's going to be very exploit scenario driven, meaning this is what we saw. It's very wordy, it's very descriptive. This is what we saw, this is what was in the environment when we achieved this particular point. Because of that, we chose to go here. When we did that, it was blocked, so we went over here. And it's very talky, but by nature, because what you're doing is you're emulating an adversary. And so effectively what the report needs to look like is a pen test report looks like I threw a bunch of stuff at a wall and this is all the stuff that's stuck. And then a red team report is we are a bad guy and we got to your juicy bits and this is exactly how we did it. So there's different perspective report, and they look and feel very different.
Seeing now I need to use the term juicy bits more often, because that was just you really hit it out of the park there. Gordon, well, I'm distracted with that thought. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think what Andrew said pretty much hits it. I would say it's essentially a red team report is going to be more of a story. As essentially a pen test report is going to be more like a technical report, like we did this, here. Whereas red team, like Andrew was saying, it's going to be started here. And usually when, we do it, we're like, here's what we were trying to do at the very beginning. Like, here are the objectives we were trying to hit. Okay, now here's where we started and why. And then based on this, we saw this. And based on what we saw here, we chose to go after this thing. Maybe there's more over here. Like, you can add in some other context too. And it kind of goes into the other point of if you're hitting a roadblock. I've had it before in ops where we're like, we could probably get here this way, but it's going to take too long, or, it's not working well enough. So we're going to pick a different path. And that doesn't mean that wasn't a path that could be taken to actually get to the same objective. So you want to highlight that kind of thing in your report as well. So we've done that before of, hey, we took a look over here. Looks pretty sus, but we didn't have time to explore, or just like wasn't directly related to our objectives, but still looks pretty bad. You might want to check this out, kind of thing. Whereas at times, especially depending on like internal versus external, is going to make reports look different too. If you hire a third-party consulting firm, they're not going to give you all of the juicy tricks that they used a lot of the time. Even with an internal red team, you're not going to get all the tricks, but you're probably going to get more insight into what happened than you will with an external team. But yeah, I would say red team is more of a story, whereas pen testing is more of a report card, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you ever used the term sus in an actual meeting? Because I know I've used that with probably leadership that I shouldn't have.
It depends on the meeting. Like, we have different breakdowns for reports. We have more technical heavy reports for the defensive teams versus executive debriefs. And I don't believe I've used the word sus with executives yet, but I might make that a personal mission. Yeah.
Yep.
I say that's a life goal right there.
Yeah.
Andrew, I see you taking notes over there.
Yep. My next executive summary is going to have sus in it.
Yeah, exactly.
if nothing else comes out of this panel, that's all I need. That's my Friday right there.
Yep.
Well, let's recenter. Let's grab another question that's a little bit more back to center. This one comes from Hacktivist. This was one of our pre-submitted questions that I want to combine with a question that I saw in the chat from Some Park. Let me see if I can find it. Let me go ahead and read this question. What foundational skills are necessary for someone starting out in red teaming? So what would you look for if you wanted to start red teaming? Either skills or personality traits for this one.
Yeah, so real quick and easy, since you're saying starting, let's not assume that you have any experience, right? So what really matters is your mindset. It's 100% a mindset thing. This goes back to what Gordon was saying earlier about how you keep the question of how you keep up being a red teamer. You have to be interested in it. If you're not interested in what you're doing, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to do well in the field, just because it does take a significant amount of effort, not just in performing, but learning the requisite knowledge to be able to perform the duties is just a massive undertaking if you're not interested. And so that mindset of, I'm going to learn this thing regardless. There's a touch of like a lack of ego, because you're going to fail a lot. Because by nature, you have to come up with a bunch of ideas, and most of these ideas are going to end up being not good ideas, for one reason or another. Reason being, remember that red teamers don't want to get caught, and so
are you my project manager? Tell me.
Most of your ideas are not going to be good ideas, and so you have to like lower that ego and understand that there is a path. So that's the other aspect of red teaming is there's no perfect system. And so it's sort of like a balance of the ego. You have to be able to take it on the chin and fail a lot, but you also have to know that with enough skill and enough time, you can achieve your goal. There's nothing blocking you from your goal. So it's kind of like a back and forth, but that mindset of wanting to dig in and understand something beyond any other desire, that's kind of a necessity, I would say.
Yeah, I would say wanting to sink your teeth into stuff. I would say if I'm looking at someone like applying for a job, I want to see some sort of demonstration that they actually like this kind of thing. So they're dabbling a little bit, but you don't need a ton of experience, but like you're watching YouTube videos, you might be playing with something like Hack the Box. You're like looking or trying to be interested in this. And then I would say as part of that mindset, there's just like a curiosity element. If someone's describing a system to you, there's a lot of folks that will take the information they receive at face value and be like, okay, this is how the system works. Whereas if you're in red teaming, you should more be like, okay, why did we do it that way? Does it actually work that way? If I poke at this thing, that might mess things. Like, how can I just mess this up, basically, in some form or fashion? Similar kind of to exploit development, but with red teaming, it's also just a breakdown of systems and processes. At the end of the day, something isn't working as it should, or something was completely overlooked, right? Like there's just nothing watching this here because no one had the idea that this would be terrible. Or someone did and someone else was just too lazy to deal with it, kind of thing. You see that a lot too. That's honestly, that is a lot of the problem. But yeah, I would say
it's some real honesty right there.
Yeah. It's a large amount of the problem. Did you want us to answer this question I see on the bottom of the screen too, by the way?
Yeah, I wanted to jump to that. Andrew, before I jump to that question, was there anything you wanted to add on to the skill sets and foundations?
Yeah, so actually I was going to mention this on a previous question, but it's circling back around. So I did want to say, I first was reminded of this when the pen test versus red team question came up, but one aspect of the skill set that is discussed a lot in both circles, but is really only put into practice much on the red team side, is social engineering. So you don't find a lot of social engineering on the pen side just because it's kind of a weird assessment to do in that kind of a space. But red teaming, it's very heavy. So my point in saying that in this context is that there's skills that maybe you have, like the social engineering side skills, you'd want to focus more on the red team side than the pen test side. And with like the beginning skills, oh man, I think I just derailed myself. Something about
all good. If you want, we can also come back to that. What I wanted to lead us into, so the skill set that we talked about leads very naturally into how that applies to the market. And Some Park had an awesome question here that we might only be able to answer this from the American side of things, but when you're looking at the job market from both, I guess, financial and educational standpoint, what are your thoughts for new people looking to be red teamers?
You take this one first, Gordon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. For me, again, I can talk mostly to the American side. I will say, you said specifically from a financial and educational standpoint.
Take your pick. We'll do our best to answer this. This is kind of a knowledge we might not have.
The financial standpoint, I can tell you with almost 100% certainty, you will get paid much more in America, in the United States, than you will in Europe. Sad to say for my European fellows, but that is just the state of the industry based on all the other professionals I've talked to that work in Europe and stuff. It's a pretty decent sized disparity too. So if you're really interested in the financial side of things for this business, I would try to work in the States specifically. That can be difficult for visas, etc. But just from the purely financial side, go stateside. If you're talking about the educational component, I think it really varies. I don't think most education systems are going to prep you either way. Like formal education is not going to prepare you for this business very well. I teach a master's course in a forensics master's that I try to touch on some of these topics, but it's very basic. And students tell me that they have nothing like this. Like if you take computer science, will it help with coding and stuff? Maybe some basics, but it's not often going to touch on a lot of these topics. And that's why, again, when we're looking for new people, you're not looking for someone that already knows everything. You're looking for someone that's willing to learn, because most people will come in with close to zero, if not zero, knowledge, just based on how things are taught. This industry is moving too fast, and there's not been enough emphasis on the offensive side of the house, or even the defensive side of the house a lot of the time. So I wouldn't, I'm assuming this is going to be true in Europe too, but I wouldn't expect any formal education system to prep you well for this path. Maybe do something computer science related. A lot of people I know didn't even come from that background that do this now. I didn't come from that background. I did math and economics in university, and I took one coding class. So most of this is just learned on the job, just the nature of the work.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yeah. So I'll jump off the back of that. So they tie together the financial and the educational standpoints. So it's an interesting perspective if you're looking at the operator's perspective or the business that's hiring the operator's perspective. So from just exactly like Gordon said, the operator is going to want to work in America. It's just obviously much more lucrative. But businesses are actually going to want to look outside of America because it's much more lucrative for them. The talent is cheaper outside of America. Now, when you speak to the education aspect, what Gordon said is exactly correct. You're not going to find a red team bachelor's degree that someone has that they're like, oh, this guy's definitely the best. It all starts with that mindset. So everyone's specialties are going to be different. Everyone's capabilities and experience are going to be different, and the mindset is really what drives all of those differences. And so globally, humans are good at this. It doesn't really matter American, European, whatever. It's the mindset. If you have the mindset, it doesn't matter who you are. So that's kind of like there's this unbalanced equation, if you will, where Americans make a lot more doing this than other people, but they're not a lot better. It's a natural thing that humans are good at being curious. And if you can point that curiosity at technology, then you can be a red teamer. And so there's this weird sort of scenario where a lot of red teamers come out of America where it's a higher cost, but I think that just means that there's probably a lot less people that we're looking at and being visibly aware of globally.
I think you're muted.
I muted myself to sneeze. Yeah. I did it to myself. Well, you hit on a couple.
Oh,
and now his ISP's doing it to him.
Yep. They heard us. It's the European hackers got mad and we're like, oh, we're going to kill this live stream immediately.
Yep.
To add on to the point, I guess, while we're waiting, I would 100% agree. Having met a lot of European hackers, the skill level is not the difference here. It's just the weird way the American market works tends to pay a bit more. But there are other costs. I will say it's pretty nice business to work in for benefits and stuff usually as well. Usually get a decent amount of time off. I will say, just as personal advice, if you want a nice quality of life, angle yourself for some kind of internal team. You'll learn a lot if you do consulting because you have a lot of different engagements with a lot of different customers, but it's a much more grinding lifestyle.
Yeah. I'll definitely say that too.
Excellent. Okay, thank you guys for carrying on the conversation. Y'all are the best. Well, I did want to jump to a quick kind of feel-good question. Do you think it's fair to say that anyone could be a red teamer if they put their mind to it, if they really worked at it?
I mean, I'm not going to say that it's not an achievable thing for anybody. I think it is achievable for anybody, but again, just I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like if you don't have the right mindset, then you're not gonna be able to focus on it. It's just that really simple. If you can't find yourself sitting and like getting lost for 5 hours in front of a computer because there's a problem that you're trying to solve, if you can't imagine yourself doing that, probably won't do very well. But if you can, then that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, can anyone play the piano? Like, theoretically, yes. But, like, if you're forced to sit there and practice for 24 hours a day, and, like, that's the reason, like, you can get really good, but some people enjoy playing the piano and some people don't. So I wouldn't say, even if you're interested in cyber, by the way, there's this, like, fixation on the offensive side is the sexy side. There's a lot more demand and need for defensive folks, actually. And the defensive side can be really fun, too. Everyone thinks defense and they think, like, SOC analyst. But the people doing, like, ADR development, custom rule set development, like threat hunting, those are some of the best folks by far. And some of the most interesting challenges. I will say, and maybe I'm biased, I personally find the defensive problem harder than the offensive problem. If you're trying to solve those problem sets, I don't even think it's really a question of which one is harder. So if you really want to be churning that brain, trying to solve the defensive based problems, making those kind of technical controls, etc., to catch the latest and greatest attacker techniques, the attackers are way ahead in the game, and it is a very unbalanced equation. So it's the need for defense is there too. Don't just limit yourself by thinking I have to do offensive security. Everything else sucks. There's a lot of room in security to play.
Offensive security is the best. What are you talking about?
It is. I mean, I really enjoy it, obviously, but I'm saying there's room to play there too, especially and to be a good offensive person, you should dabble in defensive anyway, for sure, just so you know both sides of the coin. But there's a lot of fun stuff in defense as well. So just make sure you don't. I've seen a lot of people that are like, I have to do this. And I'm like, you're not even in the industry yet. Like, you have no idea what it looks like. Take a look around before you jump in.
Yep. I totally agree. I like to paint the picture for folks that offensive versus defensive is kind of like they're direct inverses, in that when you're looking at the offensive perspective, you start from a very broad, diverse sort of scope, meaning anything is available, and you work on narrowing your scope. So like, this is my environment, these are all the available vulnerabilities that I have, and you try and figure out which one or two are going to give you the best output. Whereas with defensive, it's the exact inverse. You have to look at everything the entire time and continue broadening your scope, because the bad guys are going to broaden their scope and then focus in on those things that you're not looking at. And so you have to continue broadening your scope to look at as much as possible and then tighten up all of it. So blue is definitely harder. It's a much larger scope. It's a much bigger problem set. And like you said, Gordon, offensive is always going to be ahead because all they have to do is be right once. And blue has to be right all the time, every time, across all verticals. And so it's an impossible problem facing an impossible threat. And that's why we're all here, and the industry won't ever stop.
I appreciate you both highlighting why we have job security too. Thank you both for such an awesome breakdown of that question. It's just something that, as much as it can be a feel-good question, there's a lot of depth there, and I sincerely appreciate you both going into that. I do want to jump back to a question that has to do with the job markets. This is one that I really liked in chat. By the way, chat, thank you for all your Fs. Just in case I did kick the bucket, appreciate it. So we talked about the job markets. Many of the folks on the call, or in chat watching us on the call, are like the European and probably have an interest in working remote in the US. Would you both be comfortable talking to how remote work has kind of evolved and where it's at right now with pen testing and red teaming?
Sure, I can jump in first. Yeah, I mean, I work 100% remote. I pretty much have since the pandemic started, and my role now, like, I was hired to be full-time remote. So it definitely is achievable. I think it can get a little wonky if you're doing cross countries. Like, I know for me personally, I could work some other place up to 6 months, but for tax purposes, I think I need to be in my stated location at least 6 months of the year. The US gets very weird, specifically if you're working for a US-based company. Uncle Sam will come for their taxes regardless of where you are on the planet. So if you want to work remotely, you have to be aware of that, and also be wondering, all right, is my host country also going to come for taxes? Because you will then get double taxed for sure. Uncle Sam may not be good at a lot of things, but the tax man will come. But yeah, so there are some complications there if you want to like live in another country and then work for a US based company. But I don't know all the ins and outs because I haven't done it. I've stayed in the US the whole time I've been doing it, but remote work itself, very possible in this industry. I know a lot of folks that are remote, and that's again going to depend probably on if you're doing consulting versus if you're doing internal teaming and stuff like that. Like I mentioned before, internal tends to be a bit more chill. And so you're probably more likely to get a remote position if you're doing internal. But I could see it with some consulting as well. But a lot of consulting does require you to potentially travel a fair bit on site for folks. Just depends on the clients you're going to have to work with.
Yeah, exactly. There's one extra aspect that I kind of wanted to hit on. So you said it exactly, Gordon, correctly, is I've been doing either red teaming or pen testing since 2007, but I was more internal in 2007 and on site, but I've been remote specifically since 2015. And that's just the nature of the job. So it's it's all over the internet. Most of it's all over the internet or a phone call or some way is remote attacks anyways, remote access of some kind. And so there's no necessity for you to be on site aside from, and here's the point I wanted to make, regulatory requirements. So this is the big issue is if you're on an internal red team, a lot of businesses are going to want you near the HQ simply because they don't necessarily trust that by the nature of being a red teamer, you kind of have to almost get access to all the things that no one wants access to, which means that your machine is got juicy bits on it. And so they want that machine in the building. And then secondarily, talking about the external or consulting, it's a very remote heavy, but remote within jurisdiction. So most US based businesses, when they hire an external pen or an external red teamer or something, they're going to look in the US just because the data stays in the US. The information stays here. The background checks are easier here. All of that stuff is easier. And then it's very likely going to be the same overseas, is Germany or anywhere that's going to look locally for consulting teams, more than likely. So remote, yes, but look at jurisdictions.
No, you hit on a lot of things there that I want to start pulling on. Gordon, did you want to jump in and respond to any of that before I talk about physical attacks? And the
No, I agree. I mean, it just depends too on how the team works, what the company cares about for regulations and stuff, which is honestly it's hard to know without knowing exactly who you're working with, and it varies so much company to company that it's not a bad assumption to assume they're going to want to hire someone close-ish to an HQ, etc. But it varies by country, by company. So I agree. It definitely can be a problem if you're looking to work purely remotely.
No.
I will say that pen test is really good for remote though. Because pen test, you don't have to be as in office as often. That's just a side comment for everyone in chat. So if you're looking for US stuff, look for pen test. It's a great place to be. Now, I alluded to this very quickly, and we talked about it with the importance of being close to headquarters. We had a question. Let me go ahead and find it here regarding how often physical red team operations happen. This one, I am sorry, I don't read Cyrillic letters, so I'm not gonna butcher your name. But have either of you been on a physical engagement, or has your team done one of these? Andrew, I see your head shaking. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I'll say that physical are, I would say they're. I don't want to say they're uncommon. They're definitely common. They're things that get done, but they're one of the lesser performed types of operations. And I only say that because generally red team is misunderstood, and you're going to find a lot more pen test kind of under the red team umbrella. And most pen tests are virtual of some kind. They're against an app or against an internal or an external network presence, or it's generally very technical heavy. And so physical, you do get physical. It absolutely happens. Social engineering engagements and breaking into buildings and picking locks and all that stuff definitely happens, and there's skill sets that you can hone in this field. But I would say they're the lesser common of the body of assessments that get done.
Yeah, I would agree. It does happen, but it's much less frequent. And usually it just depends on the threat model, but it's just going to be utilized less by threat actors as well. Like if they really want to get into a physical space, I mean, it depends on who you're dealing with, obviously, but they're more likely to try to get someone like hired into the company than they are to like try and break into the building, for example. So it does happen. I was actually slated to do one of those recently, but it got canned last minute because, again, just lesser priority. It's also more kind of a hassle. You got to fly people out. You got to house them. There's always levels in a normal operation of trusted agents and stuff that can bail you out or let security know if things are really hitting the fan. Well, with physical, that's ramped up a notch, right? Because now you actually have like people's bodies on the line. Like if someone's going to get arrested now versus like detained. Someone getting tackled by a security guard is different than someone's shell getting killed. So there's a bit more headaches around it as well. But I would say it tends to get utilized less often. Not that it's not an important skill set. You like Andrew was saying, you can definitely hone that, and it's still useful, but it's definitely going to be utilized less often. Because I mean, if you think about this from just a basic logic standpoint, what costs more to do? A physical will always cost more to do than trying to launch a remote attack on a business or a company. And if you fail with the remote attack, the cost is so low, you could just try again. If you think about the ratio here, risk versus reward, launching hundreds of attacks remotely versus one physical operation, it's usually the math is pretty in favor of remote-based attacks. So not nearly as frequent. They do happen, but not nearly as frequent.
Yeah, real quick comment on the back of that. I appreciate you had said that, because you could also see the way that the industry is moving. The internet is proliferating. IoT, everything is getting connected to the internet. And so because of the increase of availability of attack surface virtually, a lot of, looking at it even at a nation state level, World War III will be fought over the internet. It's just how it works, if it's not already being fought, right? So that's kind of, you don't really need physical as much anymore when everything is on the internet. And so it's not a dying trait for sure. There's still going to be hitmen, if you will, but it's not. There's a lot more bang for your buck if you can just break in virtually.
I had no idea what to expect with this panel today. It's always a mixed bag when I'm hosting panels that say, let's see what fun questions we get today. I did not expect a discussion of World War III. However, I do have an important question for both of you. Have either of you ever been tackled by a security guard?
No.
Not yet.
Not
yet.
On the job.
There we go. Not yet.
Not on the job. Yeah, exactly. Not for my professional work.
Yes.
We do have a response from chat for that one.
Exactly.
True.
You're getting it.
that they are. Burroughs, you really nailed it there. Let's go ahead and jump to, I guess on a more serious note, we had an awesome question from Kelvin Uswan. This question reads, how do you recommend gaining hands-on experience in red teaming? I guess some context here. For the average student, it might seem a little bit difficult to get experience with red teaming topics, as there's a lot of pen test training, but there's not necessarily training that's labeled as red. Would either of you be able to speak to that and kind of how you gained your red team skill sets?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I would say don't discount the pen test training and stuff. It's still useful. It builds in. Like, do CTFs, honestly, is the easiest way as like a student. Do CTFs, get involved with cyber challenges. CCDC is a big thing for universities that actually is much, like the skill level displayed there can be really, really astonishing to see from the industry side. So definitely try and get involved in things of that nature. But a lot of it, just by the nature of the job, if you don't want to be a criminal, will be learned on the job. There's only so much you can do legally sitting in school as a student, etc. That's why I say get involved with these challenges, get involved with the groups, because that will get you closer to what you can do and still be legal. But there's only so much you can do from the legal side. You can't go breaking into companies to try and figure out how this works, right? And a lot of this is just experience based, because you're not going to just know, like, what can I do against an EDR? Like, especially as a student, you're most likely not going to have experience dealing with enterprise level defensive software. You're just not. You might get trial copies that you could play with and try and see what works, what doesn't. But staying up to date on blog posts and things like that. But this is where I almost view red teaming as almost like an apprenticeship kind of thing, like an age-old trait or trade, I should say, where you go in and you have more experienced people tell you, here's what you should do because X, Y, Z. Here's what you probably shouldn't do. And then you build on that on your own, right? Through experience, but also through reading through articles. You can validate some of this stuff. Sometimes people will seem experienced, but give you crazy advice. That always happens. But it is one of those things that certain experience has to be baked in, and certain experience just can't be replicated. It's kind of like wartime conditions. You can try to train, but there's nothing quite like actual combat, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No, that's absolutely good comments. I'll say that I like to sort of I like to answer this question from the perspective of, again, pen versus red, because this is another huge difference between the two individuals. Is if you're just a hacker and all you want to do is break into stuff, then you're a great pen tester. You'll find all of the different holes and you'll be able to report on all the different holes, and that's exactly what your job should be. Now, if you have a lot of experience on the red and the blue side, and you can understand what an attacker might do and all of the different ways that that attacker might be caught, all of the detection capabilities on the attempted attack vector, that's where you're really going to get the most benefit from a red teamer. So again, sort of leading in my previous comment about purple team being like a really heavy initial entry into red team. Gaining hands-on experience in red teaming is you have to understand both sides. So the best way I would go about gaining that experience is outside of OJT, because that's how I gained my experience. Was my I got a job early in my career as a red teamer. But what I would say now, like someone what they did to gain experience that I would find beneficial is build out a detection lab yourself. So not only do the hack the box stuff, but also do I'm going to detect the stuff I'm doing. I'm going to see and understand the attacks that I'm running and how they work to whatever level your comfort is. And that's kind of where follow your passion, because that's where you're going to have the most motivation and drive. And then when you follow your passion and understand all of the aspects of the technologies that you're dealing with. So not only how to hack it, but also how to detect the hack that you just ran, how to bypass that detection, and then how to go and detect that bypass. So like, if you can go into that level and that's what interests you, then you're a great red teamer. So there's sort of a difference. And I definitely lean on red teamers on my team are going to have to be purple. They're going to have to know red and they're going to have to know blue, because honestly, from a red team perspective, if you can't provide the recommended remediations for what you're doing, you're not succeeding well enough in your report writing.
Absolutely. You hit on a lot of really key points, and I guess I want to reiterate for chat just how important it is to really put yourself out there and, do things that you're uncomfortable with. I think that that's part of what you were getting at. I guess, Andrew, so I don't flatten your point, was there anything you wanted to reiterate before I move to the next question?
Yeah, just to sort of sum it up, is gaining hands-on red team experience is probably best done through not only just the hack the box attacking, but also building a defensive lab and a detection lab around that, so you can have a really good understanding of both the red and the blue side of all the attacks that you're doing.
Appreciate the promotion. By the way, just for everyone who knows in chat, we don't ask these guys to promote for us, but we do appreciate it when we can get it. No. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there with the practice makes perfect with all this. Absolutely. Before I jump to the next question, Gordon, did you want to jump in at all on that? I knew you had already spoken to the training, but did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, totally agree that it's kind of like this area is so broad, anything helps, to be honest. And you don't know when something is going to just randomly be like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. Like, I remember I got asked to check out some web application, and I'm not usually a web guy. So I was like, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to help much. All my team took a look at it, nothing. And then I remembered this random tool that I had looked at around Cypher suites, and I checked the Cypher suites, and sure enough, there was something that could be done there. Like, oh yeah, that thing I looked at like 2 years ago that randomly like stuck out in my head. Sure, why not? You just never know. So the defensive side for sure will help you as well, because I mean, part of your job, you need to know how to remediate things, but you also need to know how to evade things. That's part of why I did my master's in computer forensics, is because I needed to know, all right, what do forensic examiners look for? So how can I evade that? So learning both sides will definitely help you. Defense is also something you can do much more legally. So you can definitely delve a lot into defense, and it will definitely help you out for sure. Totally agree.
Now that we've talked quite a bit about how we need to know defense, let's talk a little bit about the future of red teaming. This is another question from Sunpark that is a really fun one. How do you see red teaming in the future? Due to the rapid development of the AI field, wouldn't the blue team have the upper hand? How are engagements going to be conducted? Can we still be evasive? Feel free to take little parts of that question. I realize there's multiple questions there, but we can kind of unpack that.
Yeah, no, I really like that question. I think about this a lot. I am co-founder of an AI business, so I think about this a lot. Yeah, so you may think at maybe the initial juncture that blue team is going to end up getting the upper hand because there's more tooling that can look at all of the data. But interesting aspect about AI is it encompasses the unique human characteristic of pattern matching. And so we don't do as well with large amounts of data and pattern matching, and it does. And so my point in pointing that out is just like Gordon had just referenced about his previous experience, he had seen this one thing a while ago outside of his niche specialty that triggered and helped him remember, oh, this may be an active threat vector. Well, AI doesn't have to remember that. It just automatically knows all of those threat vectors and can look and check all of them effectively simultaneously. And so taking an open model that doesn't have a lot of neutering in the training process so that it's capable of producing what would be seen as malicious or unethical sort of content. You can totally have an AI build malware that attacks things that you never even knew was there. So I don't think that blue is the only side that's going to benefit from AI. Red is definitely going to benefit. But the interesting aspect is going to get to the what do they call it? I can't remember the exact term, but where the AI can explain to you what it's doing or why it's making the decisions it's making. That's going to be more of the challenge, I'd say, in the short to medium term on the red side is we may be able to find attack vectors that are unique and novel and really powerful, but getting to understand how they were discovered or understand how to discover more like that may be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely room for red teaming in the future because there's obviously a lot AI will help with. It's already being used. You already see that machine learning based detections and heuristics all the time. But it's really hard because people be doing weird stuff. Basically, like normal people be doing weird stuff all the time that is perfectly non-malicious behavior. And so if you model yourself after those people, it's just really hard to distinguish actual malicious behavior. So even if you had the best AI model in the world, I will tell you, you're going to get a lot of false positives, which means someone's going to tune something out because an analyst is not going to want to look at all this. There's always going to be a human element that has to actually triage stuff that's being given in front of them. I've seen instances, not at Zoom, but at previous companies where we actually had access to the defender's notes during the operation. And we had an alert trigger and the analyst was like, seems normal, fine. And that kind of stuff is still going to happen even if you have the best AI in the world. But beyond that, as Andrew was saying, it's actually already being used now to great detriment by real threat actors, not red teamers. There's going to be a certain element that actually I think is going to be harder for red teamers because we don't have state-sponsored resources to build massive AI in-house tooling, whereas the big players do. And you're already seeing some of those things. And I'm talking the scary stuff of like, hey, I've got AI now that's constantly probing the internet to look for anything that's open and immediately exploitable. And then it just auto-exploits and gives me shells and lets me know. And now I have what might have taken me and a team of folks weeks to do. I now have hundreds of different targets that I can launch attacks from in the span of hours, minutes, depending on how good your systems are. And it's not just like a Metasploit scan that's looking for an open vulnerability. It's like, oh, I'm going to train this AI to just recognize and auto-exploit buffer overflows that haven't been discovered yet.
Yep.
And stuff like that, I can tell you with decent certainty that probably already exists and is probably already starting to be abused now. So you think it's going to help defense? It's, I think, actually much scarier how much it is probably already helping offense. You know, blue teams at most companies, even EDR vendors, the people trying to build the defensive tooling that have the most money to spend, their resources will pale in comparison to the real players that want to get where they want to go. You just have to assume that those players can go wherever they want to go at this point. And defense, like I said, this is a game. There's a lot of new technology that always comes out that makes people think in this race, oh, blue's going to be ahead now. No. Always assume blue is far behind. Not even that they're even. Blue is far behind and will remain so. Almost guaranteed.
Yep.
That's a mindset shift that not a lot of people not in the industry realize. People read, there's always these buzzing optimistic articles of, yes, all attacks will be eliminated now, like hacking will cease. And especially if you deal with vendor presentations, you're going to get the same BS. If anyone tells you they have the solution to cybersecurity, run away. Because no one that actually knows what they're talking about will ever tell you that, because they know they'd be FOS if they said that. Like I said, I run a business on the side that focuses on the defense. We focus on like deceptive defense. I will never tell you this will solve all of your problems. I will tell you, use this in conjunction with a lot of other things, and your chances are now better. Better. Not that you're done. Your chances are better now. And that's what an honest person would tell you that knows what they're talking about. So,
Absolutely.
So sorry to turn the question on its head, but no, I do not think blue team will have the upper hand. Not in the near future, probably not in the far future either. It's just the nature of the game. Red and attackers, they only have to succeed once necessarily to get to what they want. Blue has to win everywhere all the time.
And on that, let's just highlight layer 8. As long as there's a human in the mix, there's going to be social engineering. So like, no matter how much AI you put in front of it, if I can talk to your business people, I can probably get them to give me access.
Social engineering or insider threat. Like, you'll just get someone, again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you have a lot of money and time and resources, you can work on getting someone hired at pretty much any business, given enough time, right? And then get them to do whatever you want to do. This is why insider threat is also something that should be in everyone's threat models of something to deal with.
Absolutely.
Now, I just kept thinking it wouldn't be a proper red team panel if we didn't set every blue teamer watching this on edge for their weekend. And that question did exactly what I wanted to do.
Yep. But that's a good point. Blue teamers should always be on edge. They should have the understanding that there's the assume breach mindset is very strong. Have that mindset.
I thought you were just putting them on notice. I thought you were just saying, I'm watching you.
I'm in your nets.
Well, I mean, at least you're honest. No, that's great. Let me go ahead here 1 second. I need to resume my train of thought. We had another awesome question in chat by HXZ. This one, I see you guys both nodding to this. Is there a role in exploit development in red team? So do you see exploit development being an active part of your operations? Whoever wants to jump on this first, I realize this is a fun one to talk about.
Yeah, I'll jump into this one first. So is there a role? Absolutely. Red teamers have to use exploits. So someone has to build them. There's an interesting sort of corollary, though, where exploit developers often tend to be more on the open source side. They exist out in the world, and then you get this POC or this exploit that then industry will, productize, if you will, and then utilize. But in a bigger red team, you're definitely going to have they're more likely your exploit devs are going to be kind of like a mixed team between like threat hunt and red. Mainly because your exploit devs are trying to find and build 0 days generally, or rebuild exploits that you don't trust that you found from open source or whatnot. But there's, I would say that there's definitely heavy correlations between exploit dev and red team. But a lot of, if you are a red team operator, a lot of what you do will not be exploit development. It will be operations. So there's definitely a big overlap in the Venn diagram, but I wouldn't say red teamers are exploit devs, and not all exploit devs are red teamers. You can do both if you want to, though.
Yeah, I would actually say you can do both, but they are different fields. Essentially, it is, I'm not going to say it's an entirely different skill set, but it's pretty close to an entirely different skill set. Exploit development, I mean, I know and have talked to people that just do professional exploit development all the time. It's a really variable field. There's a lot of like highs and lows of, you don't know when you're going to get something. You don't know how long it will take. You might find a bug and you don't know how long it will take to weaponize that bug. You know, you might have an intuition. The more you do it, the more you'll have an intuition of, it will probably take this amount of time, depending on the bug you find. But it's a very inexact science. And so for that reason, businesses don't tend to hire exploit developers to be on a red team, unless, like, if the business does exploit development as a contractor, for example, something, then yeah, you can get a job there. But like for a red team to have an exploit developer, the returns for a business, you know, businesses are all about, give me metrics, give me solid data. When will I have this thing? Will I have this thing in 2 weeks? Yes, right? And that's not easy to say with exploit development. On top of that, red team operations, while they can last a fair bit longer than like a pen test, that's still, because of the variable time, you can't necessarily afford to be like, hey, we got to this point, now we need to exploit this thing. Can you write this in a day? Maybe the answer is yes, depends. IoT devices are pretty crappy, to be honest, so maybe. But
I was waiting for you to say that.
But depending on the scenario, that might be oh, I have no idea. Even if you're a seasoned exploit developer, you have to take some time, look. And so usually businesses are about those hard qualities, the give me the fact of, I can write this in a report, I know exactly when this is done. Exploit development is not a field like that in the same vein.
Yeah.
So I would say on most red teams I've been, there is room for the red teamer to do some exploit development if they want, maybe a side research project, etc. But usually active on an op, you're not going to get a lot of time to do it, if any. And you're certainly not going to hire someone just to do exploit development for you. Unless, again, if you're one of the bigger players, if you're a government and you have a ton of money, then yeah, maybe you'll have a team of just exploit developers to help with your other operations, etc. But if you're on a regular red team, you know, most likely you're not going to do that as your main role, if that makes sense.
For sure. Google has their red team. Google has Project Zero.
Yeah. And that's Google. And Google has a lot of money to throw at this problem. Most places are not Google. Yeah. If you're very talented, the people at Project Zero are insane too. So yeah, if you love exploit development and you're insanely talented, highly recommend go work at Project Zero. But for the rest of us, it's a bit more, it's tough. Yeah.
So yeah, just to hit, is there a role for exploit devs? If you are specifically an exploit dev, go work for a government, go to the open source world, or you know, massive businesses like Google and Microsoft, and that's going to be where you're going to sit for an exploit dev.
Now, we have kind of a related question to that in chat that was just asked. I'm sorry, I still can't read your name, and I don't want to say it just terribly. Exploit development or malware development, is there a difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, 100,000%. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so exploits are much smaller scope than malware as the general term. So like an exploit, you have a vulnerability, and the exploit is code that takes advantage of the vulnerability to get access on the other side of that vulnerability, whatever that is, whether it's remote code execution or, you know, file access, whatever. And malware, though, is a suite of technology that performs goals for the operator. So your malware is like your C2. Your C2 doesn't necessarily have to have exploits in it. You can drop a C2 that calls back to you and there's no exploit involved. So malware has a lot of other aspects to think about. Exploit dev is just break this unwell built code, and that's it. That's the whole point of the exploit.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, exploits are much more limited in nature just by the definition of what an exploit is. It's exploiting a particular technology, a particular program, particular software. Malware is a really broad term, and there are debates in the community about what constitutes malware. Like, theoretically, if you get someone to download a normal remote administration tool, is that malware if it's used maliciously? Like, honestly, the term that I always think of is like software that is abused or used maliciously can be malware. There's actually a gray line of what malware even is, and where you can extend the line of malware to. If I'm using a command prompt on your computer and I use it to delete all of your crap after SCPing it off your machine, was the command prompt malware? Like, it's hard to say, right? I just achieved the same goals I would have potentially with other malware, right? So you can see where there's some gray space, whereas exploit development is very narrow in scope. So malware development is a much, much broader term. That might be building C2 tooling. That might be playing with normal software, doing DLL hijacks. You're mostly relying on a normal benign software, but having it do something extra. And one could make the argument that you building an exploit, running that exploit, the exploit still is malware, but not all malware is an exploit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's not an exploit in the traditional sense. So like you also have what I would say malware, like, you know, your TikTok or Facebook apps. Some people would say that that's malware because
I was waiting for it. I knew that was coming.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, like, if you can get information on me and my family that I don't even have and track us to a level that is not even possible for me to do, I would say that what you do with that information could absolutely be deemed malicious. So that is malware. So yeah, if you want to get into malware development, go work for TikTok.
For real, though.
That's going to get clipped out of this. Oh my gosh. Well, Gordon, before I jump to some more fun, and we do have some silly questions in chat, did you want to add anything onto that?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Like, they are actually very different things most of the time. Yeah.
I was waiting for the endorsement to go work for TikTok there.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've seen so many of those ads and requests, the friggin' LinkedIn recruiters. Hey, we got a team here. You want to join? Yeah, no, don't do it. It's not worth it. Not worth it.
Oh gosh. What I'm seeing is when you get to be a red teamer, you start to figure out how much you're willing to sell yourself for.
Or not.
Or not, yeah.
Or not, yeah, that's true. I guess TikTok, maybe not so much. Well, let me go ahead and move on before I get stuck on that question. We had an awesome question. Let's go to this one from LTN Labs. We've talked a lot about malware. One thing that a lot of people struggle with as they look to become a red teamer is learning evasion. What is your recommendation for staying current on evasion techniques? How do you keep up to date?
You take
this
this
is
one.
actually. Oh, Andrew, you want to take it?
No, you take this one for sure.
Yeah. This is actually one of my big interests and hobbies. So it's a great question. There's a lot of things. A lot of it is reading articles. A lot of it is having a lab and constantly testing out. The other tricky part is there's a billion different tools that you might have to go up against. So really it depends on your needs, right? A lot of people, they want to have this silver bullet kind of attack tool that gets through anything. It's undetectable everywhere, all that good stuff. And it's more likely, it's much lower effort to know exactly the kind of technology you're dealing with and then just circumvent that and know how that tends to work, as opposed to being able to have the silver bullet that works on everything. To be honest, if you're one of the big players, again, this is where it's hard for red teamers to actually emulate some of these threat models, if you're one of the big players, you're going to be you have the capability to do some stuff that will be extremely hard to detect no matter almost what technology you're using. And I'm talking about like supply chain based attacks, hardware based stuff that most red teams will not be able to emulate. If you want evasion against software, against more of what's in the wheelhouse, for a lot of threat groups too. I mean, they're not going to pull out the big guns unless they really have to. And most of the time you really don't have to. You just need to know what tools you're going up against. You need to kind of have a lab environment set up to deal with those tools. You need to understand underlying how those tools are working. And then reading a lot of articles on people testing different evasion techniques. As you start to get in the business, you'll get more ideas of stuff that you can play with and try. It also is very OS dependent. And this is where it becomes a very niche topic, essentially, of like, and this is true, I would say, as you become a more experienced red teamer, people tend to start branching off into their niche topics of like, you need a lot of general knowledge for sure to operate, but you'll start to get pretty specific in certain areas. So you doing evasion on a Windows machine is very different than you doing evasion on a Mac system or a Linux system. And you need to know the intricacies and differences in how those operating systems function, where the telemetry is, where the weirdness can be, how the EDR products work. Hint, they're much crappier on Linux and Mac in general. Definitely room to play on Windows for sure. A lot more research there, but at the same time, it's very different depending on the tool sets you're going up against, depending on the OS. So there's a lot of information there. And so staying up to date is a constantly running race of reading articles, making sure you're going up against stuff. But usually you will specialize and start to specialize more. It just depends again on what you have to go up against for your operations to be successful. And a lot of it will involve malware development. Being able to write your own custom tooling, stuff like that is pretty much a necessity if you really want to be evasive. You can't rely on off-the-shelf open source tooling to do your stuff. You can use open source tooling to give you ideas and modify it. But right out of the gate, you're going to need to have some pretty hefty coding knowledge most of the time as well to modify stuff, to build your own stuff, know how basic techniques work. It's intimidating at first. I'm not going to lie to you, because you'll read some of these articles and you won't understand 95% of what is being talked about. But as you get further in, things start to make more sense. Like, I've seen that before. Oh, I get this now. And as you write your own tools, that's when things really start to fall into place of like, okay, yeah, I understand how this works. I understand what it means to do like import address table chicanery, we'll say, because I've had to write my own like PE parser and actually have to deal with all of this stuff. So it's intimidating from the surface, but if it's something that interests you, you'll dive more and more in, read more and more articles. And yeah, very long-winded way to answer your question, but it's there's no one set way for staying current, and you're probably going to specialize, is the short and sweet.
Yep. And so I completely agree with everything. One thing that I would add is highlighting some of the skill sets and the skill sets required and the industry gotchas sometimes. So skill sets required, as far as recommended for staying current on evasion techniques, understand and be comfortable with reverse engineering, at least the concepts at the high level, because you're going to need to know that stuff reading through the reports that these people are putting out on how malware works and what are some of the ways that they're being evaded. But then secondarily, the EDR businesses, they have like this sort of shot in the foot scenario, because they're building tools that try and detect these things, but they're also industry thought leaders, so they have to produce blog posts and explain how these things are caught, but they don't want the bad guys, or they don't want the bad guys to know how they're doing it exactly, because then they could just bypass that. And so they kind of like, they'll express some information in these blog posts, but they don't give you the real juicy details. And so having an understanding of reverse engineering, and then even more advanced, being able to do the reverse engineering, you'll get a much better understanding of how EDR works from an operating system perspective and how it's executing. And then secondarily, you'll figure out how bypasses generally work. So like, like it said, IET. So you can mess with address tables. You can mess with how the malware is called in the operating system call stack, and where is the EDR looking in that call stack? Where can you get in before the EDR so that you can overwrite the EDR's address? Look, there's a lot of different things that you can kind of look at, and so even when you get into reverse engineering or evasion, there's kind of like multiple branches you can go to specialize. But really, the understanding reverse engineering and understanding the fundamental operating system architecture on how EDR performs its duty helps you figure out how to evade it.
I'll give you one last hint, which is evasion is really easy when there's no EDR product on the device that you're on.
The number doesn't count.
I'm pretty sure I've done that, and I talked a lot of garbage, talked a lot of crap, and then I found out there was no EDR endpoint, and definitely got brought up. I think that there was the SpongeBob meme that was brought up for me specifically. I'm doing so good. So yeah, I would agree, definitely. No, if there's no EDR, it's a lot better.
So I'm telling you, you can find that, and threat actors do the same thing, and that's what I'm talking about, this AI stuff. You look for those weird edge devices, and as more IoT crap gets added to networks and stuff, a lot of them don't support or have EDR, and you can live there forever.
Yep, Shadow IT is awesome.
Man, and I thought the print spooling service was my favorite place to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Microsoft basically just abandoned that. They're like, yeah, this is just too they're actually, I think, in the process of completely rewriting it because they've just acknowledged this is just too much of a problem. We will never fix this. This is too much of an issue.
They're doing the same thing to NTLM.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. It's about time. Although I will have to get a new doormat that doesn't say print spooler service or something like that. Oh my gosh. Let's go ahead and here 1 second. We have a couple more questions we're going to jump to. First and foremost, we had an excellent question about home labs. Everyone knows them. We all love them. I hope you guys have home labs. Let's talk about home labbing for Red Team. When you guys got started, or even with your home labs right now, what would you recommend? What do you find is most important in a home lab for your purposes? There we go. That's the question I wanted to ask.
So I'll say for my purposes, your home lab can serve many different purposes, especially because your home lab doesn't. I have two home labs, right? So there's the testing lab that you do like kind of your work in and you learn through, and then there's the home lab like that your home runs on. And there's two different goals for these labs, and the home lab that your home runs on is actually a really good thing to have separately, because it teaches you the defensive mindset from a defender's mindset. You actually want to defend this network, and you don't want attackers to get in. The other lab is really important for learning. Just and as far as setup is concerned, whatever you want to learn, that should be your setup. So I do highly recommend Kubernetes or containers, mainly just because you can spin up and tear down very quickly. Secondarily, it's a somewhat complex environment to set up and understand and manage. And so getting that experience and having that understanding will only benefit you in the field. So I would highly recommend containerization and orchestration just generally for those reasons. But for setups on the home lab side, minimize threat surface. That's the name of the game as far as defense is concerned. So build a home lab that does what you need it to do, and don't add more if you don't need to, which is kind of like the just general advice.
You saying I shouldn't host a Minecraft server open to the public internet? What do you mean?
Probably not, unless you want to do that. I mean, your honeypot Minecraft server is going to work great.
Yeah.
Oh, you act like you already found it.
Bitcoin mining server. I mean, yeah, Minecraft servers out there that people can join. Yeah, no, I'm a bit lazier. So to be honest, a lot of times once you get into the business, your work should have some kind of lab for you to play with anyway. So you don't necessarily have to set one up at home. But like I said, I run a side business and stuff. So I have labs set up at home for that. A lot of virtual machines. I highly recommend virtual machines and containers. for ease of tearing down, spinning up. I also recommend, if you haven't touched it, it's also really good to get familiar with stuff like cloud providers, Azure, AWS, etc. You do this on your own, you're already learning. Like I said, all of these things play in. The more you can absorb, the better. So working with AWS to build your home lab, you're already learning more about AWS. If you ever have to tackle that in an operation, you already have some implicit knowledge about this. You're not starting from zero. So cloud can be really helpful, actually. It also teaches you about how you would try to defend cloud, locking things down, how the networking works, how you build subnets within environments there. So I would recommend, a lot of times, virtual machines are great, but you can also find a lot of what you need available on the cloud. Like if you want to test, like let's say, for example, you have an exploit that only works against a certain version of the Windows server, you might find that is available as an instance or a droplet or whatever you want, whatever cloud provider you want to use. They have that available for you to use. You can just spin one up, throw your exploit at it, destroy the crap out of it, and then just tear it down and start over. And it's a lot cheaper than buying yourself like a Windows 2018 server, hosing it, and then dealing with that. Definitely do not order things on Amazon and then return them. I'm
feeling some self-reflection there.
Yeah,
Is this something you've done a couple times?
But suffice to say, yeah, I recommend cloud for sure. It can cost a pretty penny, so be careful what you're doing. Don't have the rude awakening when you set up 50 machines as you set up your Active Directory network, and then you're hit with the cloud bill at the end of the month. Keep track of that kind of thing. But playing with cloud is definitely recommended. And then, yeah, VMs, containers, all of it, as was mentioned before, also useful. It's, again, just helpful to teach you some of how the technology works as well. But you can find most of what you need for basic testing, for basic playing around with stuff. And then I also shout out to Hack the Box and other places like it. If you're really lazy, you can also just go take a training. You can go work in other environments set up for you for this exact kind of purpose. So it's kind of like in a video game. If you want to be lazy and unlock the DLC immediately, just pay some cash and you're there. Same with real life. Just pay some cash, and a lot of this is done for you if you want to be lazy. So you have options, really. I recommend getting your hands dirty at least a little bit so you learn about some of this stuff. But you want to go up and do some training against an Active Directory environment, go buy one of the billion trainings that exist to go do that, so you don't have to set up your entire own environment, because it also probably won't be the best approximation of a real AD environment anyway. Like I said, there's only so much you can do legally that is actually accurate to how things look, but there is a lot of room to play.
Absolutely. But play, that's the important part. Play.
Exactly.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Real quick, just because Emma tossed this in chat, we'll get our Pro Labs plug in there. Our Pro Labs are the ones that are similar to company networks. Some of the end games and other, I guess, business Pro Labs will be similar as well. But if you're looking for something fun for this weekend to play with, take a look at those. Those are going to be your simulated company networks from our end. Okay, that ends my plug. I was trying to do it with my logo there, but yeah. Yeah. No, excellent stuff. Let's go ahead. It looks like we're about at the end of our stream time. So we'll go ahead and take things away with one more, just one of my favorite questions. If you had to give one piece of advice, or you could say any piece of advice on stream related to hacking, preferably related to hacking, I should say, what would it be? And I realize I'm putting you both on the spot, so feel free to take a moment.
Yeah, no, I know my easy answer for me. Follow your passion. That's the best advice I can give, because in this industry, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. You're going to run into failures that really hurt, because you feel like it was going to be easy. You feel like you understood it. You feel like you have a lot of assumptions about how you're going to go into the scenario, and it's going to stomp on your toes, and it's going to hurt. And then you're going to have to just turn around and look at a different door and walk through that door. So low ego, follow your passion, because you're not going to be able to find the motivation to get through the struggles if you don't.
Yeah, I would say similar note is embrace failure. pretty much. I'm not ashamed to say this. So I really started in cybersecurity when I graduated school. My first job post school, I knew I wanted to get into cyber, but I didn't know that much about it. I had started like a cybersecurity club in college and looked at basic videos and stuff like that with a group of people. And the first technical certification I decided was a great job or a great idea to do about 3 months in was the OSCP. So you can imagine how that went. And I failed that exam 4 times. And for those of you that don't know, that exam is a 24-hour long pen test, essentially, or at least it was when I took it. Now there's more of an Active Directory component, but still kind of just a pen test. And you had to sit there and just try, and then you had the next 24 hours to write a report. So 4 times of failing that, the last 2, both within 5 points, you can imagine it starts to drive one slowly insane. Offensive security always tells you the try harder. That's their motto. That's a really condescending way of saying it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. I won't say the classic try harder to you. It's not about that you're not doing enough. It's that you're exactly where you need to be. This is how your brain works. Cut your brain some slack. Like, it takes time, and failure teaches you much more than success does. To be honest, it is a much longer lasting lesson. And so 5 times, and the 5th time I passed, just goes to show you, just don't, if you really like it, just keep taking a whack at it. You know, it's still going to be there. Computers will be there tomorrow. And you'll learn. You'll just slowly learn as you fail. I'm not going to tell you that you're going to fail or you're going to be failures, but failure is okay. It's how you learn this stuff. And it's not like other fields where, you know, you do badly on this test means you're bad at this. Go away. You're not going to be accepted to this other thing. Failure is you're going to like whack your head against a wall. And then years later, when you're dealing with something similar, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this BS because I spent 6 hours trying to run my own DNS server and encountered this problem like 50 times. It's driven by pain, but it's a good thing. It's hard to describe that succinctly, but failure is a really good teacher. So don't be afraid to fail. It's not like other industries. Failure is kind of a huge part of the game. If anything, you kind of want to fail at some point, because if you're never failing, it means you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. A quote that I heard a while ago that I love saying in this sort of a context is, experience is what you get when you get nothing else. And that's how you should look at failure. If you have not succeeded in your goals, you have gained experience.
I love getting these little nuggets from these AMAs. It's one of my favorite things with hosting these. I'm going to steal that, editor, because that is a great quote. That is fantastic. Wow. Thank you both. That was what a note to leave things off on. Real quick, just for everyone in chat, if anyone joined at the end, this is going up on YouTube later, so we'll have the live stream up there. I mentioned that also for Gordon and Andrew in case you guys want to link this to anyone. So I can't say this enough. Thank you so much for all your time and talking, especially on a very human level, being very open about the failure and the challenges that this industry has. So I can't thank you both enough for that. Before we go, I guess, do you guys have any small shout outs, stream appropriate shout outs?
Check out Mindbank AI.
Woo!
Yeah.
You can shout.
You can check out LegioX. The website is still a little bit behind, doing a lot of product development, and so less front facing. But if you're interested, LegioX Cyber Technologies and RansomGuard is the name of the tool we're pushing out. And then also, this is more just for when I was studying up, look at Hack the Box, but also if you want a really good YouTuber for dealing with Hack the Box, check out IPsec. Releases a lot of really good videos on how to approach these kind of black box pen test type scenarios.
Yep.
I'll be sure to pass that along to Ip. I'm sure he'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Thank you both so much. And thank you for the kind words as well. I'm sure that the team internally appreciates it. I just appreciate your time, especially on a Friday. Thank you for such an awesome stream. This has been a great panel. Probably bug you guys in the future. For everyone that's in chat, be sure to check out the awesome stuff that these cool dudes are doing. Given how awesome you guys were on the panel, I can't imagine that the other work that you're doing is anything less than really cool. So yeah, thank you so much. I think that about does it for the live stream. We'll go ahead and do our quick wrap up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I mentioned this quickly earlier. The live stream itself, this is going to be up on YouTube later. If you want kind of a taste of what we were doing, the Pearl Labs are a great place to get started. They're actually really fun to tackle on a Friday just to get started, but you will forget what you're doing by Monday. So just as a heads up, not that I've done that ever. Right? Gordon making the thing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that does it. If you guys want to go ahead and say bye with me, thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, that'll do it. I'll see everyone at the next Hack the Box live stream. Thanks all.
For having us.
Thanks for having me.